The real change and transformation has to come from within, where Flexer came about, because what we do is we work through a methodology that allows us to bring in people who've been there and done that.
Any organization transformation, right? I think the hardest part is getting the buy-in from the people, right?
Full buy-in from the leadership. You need to have a senior leader, ideally in a C-level leader who is actually the driver of that change.
Manager are very good leader, and the boss are very good manager.
That's a good one.
Hi everyone, welcome to Asia Business Owner Podcast, BOSS for short. With the changing economy, especially after pandemic, do you ever wonder why business lifespan is getting shorter? Do you ever wonder what causes it? Are you one of the business owners who are in the midst trying to figure a way out? Or are you intending to start your own business venture believing that everything will work out but somehow you feel something is missing? Or do you want to start a business however, you do not know what to go for? If you have all these questions on the list that I mentioned earlier, or many more that I have not mentioned, then we are here to fill the gap.
This is Ben.
And this is Joe. Before we start, please subscribe to this channel so that you will not miss any of our episodes moving forward. Today, we are very happy to have Moritz, founder of Flexer, to share his journey of entrepreneurship with us. Moritz has more than 20 years of experience leading organizations through commercial growth and organization change. Of course, he also prides himself as an executive and practitioner working with the leadership teams. Moritz, can you give the listeners an introduction about yourself before we dive into the juicy part of your journey?
Brilliant. Yes. Thanks for having me, Joe. Thanks for having me, Ben. Super excited to be on this podcast today. I've spent a lot of time growing businesses, almost all my life growing businesses in Asia since 20 years ago. 12 years of that, I ran agencies, agency businesses across different growth markets. I was 6 years in India, 4 years in Vietnam, 2 years in the Middle East. And then switched actually to the insurance sector and to digitization. And I was working with a corporate venture in the insurance sector. I was chief growth officer, and our focus was on digitizing the customer engagement for the insurances with a tech platform. So deep transformation also of a very traditional industry. Learned a lot along the way, and today I run Flexer to apply that experience together with amazing collaborators and other operators who have a lot to give and to provide to companies. So exciting times in the region, I think, and we're happy to be a part of it.
Fantastic. Just curious, like what is your origin story like? Like what made you start Flexer?
Well, I saw, two things. I think I've seen enough of the over 20 years of the growth challenges and also the growing pains that companies go through that I ran myself or that I worked with over the years. I think especially in markets in the region, there's always a challenge of who's been there and done that before, because often you find yourself in a new situation as a company. You don't know how to approach it. You try to get someone in from the outside, right? You try to get a training company or a consulting firm in. But I think my big lesson throughout the years, and also especially when we're doing digitization in insurance, is that the real change and transformation has to come from within. Yeah. And this is really often, if you try to do it from the outside, it turns into just an exercise. And then after that, you go back to doing things the way that you've done them before, right? And so if it has to come from within, what sort of support do you need? Or how can you actually take advantage of the sort of experience that you need in order to actually figure out how to do it right? And so this is where Flexer came about, because what we do is we work through a methodology that allows us to bring in people who've been there and done that. And we don't develop a system and then plonk it into the organization and say work with it, but we build it together with the executives in the organization. And that's, I think, what makes the big difference, right? Because
so essentially you
all have enough experience of how it goes wrong, right? So this is how we get it right.
So essentially you plan yourself and your team inside the organization and then work with the people.
This is correct. Yes, we work with people who have exactly the experience of that is needed in the organization, who have the frameworks and methodologies, but the real experience of how it works. This is the big difference, right? It's not theoretical. It's not a framework that is coming from some management handbook, but it is lived experience, lived frameworks, and the knowledge of what makes it work or what makes it fail also, and probably having been through a failure here or there through their long careers, right? And so what we do as a team then is we work together with the company to actually build from the inside their model, their system, the system that works for them. And we don't need to hand anything over, because at the end of our engagement, they have built it themselves and they can run it because they know how to do it, right? They have built it.
Okay,
Right.
let's dive in a little bit more in details. Like what kind of transformations you are providing?
So mostly focused on areas of technology and leadership. Operational excellence, also an area that we work with clients on. But for example, a lot of the briefs we're getting in the area of AI and technology transformation, but never stand alone. They usually have an element or are combined with leadership capability building. Because, and then this is the realization that our clients have when we get the briefs, is that they have often treated the technology change as a separate in the past, right? And they say, okay, we need a new system, we need a transformation. But if you separate out the team and the leadership piece, then you're not able to run it in the end, right? And so the team needs to grow with it, we treat it together. And this is the sort of areas that we work with, both with enterprise customers and with SME customers.
So in the course of your work with your clients, right, what are the typical big challenges that they face? Just now you mentioned about growing pains. It's like what areas are there generally?
So in Singapore, you are under a lot of pressure, especially in the SME sector, to you're competing with the world, right? You're competing with the world. You're competing globally. A lot of SMEs work with clients in the region or customers in the US even, or in other markets, and so you are competing with the world for excellence and for differentiation, but you're also competing for talent with the world. And so the challenge there is that you know probably what you need to do, but you don't know how to do it fast and efficiently, right? And then if you look at the SME sector in particular, I think what I find is when I speak to SME owners is that they have areas that they know that need to change or that need to be improved, or where they can really have a benefit of growth if they fix it, if they get it right. But they're not familiar enough with the area to actually know how to do it themselves. And so finding a way to bring in an expert that can do it, that has done it before, is a great solution for them, I think. On the enterprise side, and I think this is where I think you already mentioned it, Joe, right? We work mostly, today we work mostly in Singapore and in Vietnam. And on the enterprise side, for example, in Vietnam, the challenge is completely different. The challenge is that you are in a growth market where the targets are being set very high first of all, by the government, right? Vietnam is targeting developed nation status by 2045. Big enterprises, whether private or state-owned, are setting their own targets high accordingly. But this is not just growth. This is also transformation. The economy, the companies need to grow up in that time as well, right? And so with that realization, there's a lot of desire to move fast in different areas. Vietnam is known for leapfrogging in industries like banking or retail or e-commerce. But there's always the team element and the leadership element that needs to come along with it, right? And so this is, I think, the biggest challenge that we see in Vietnam is bringing the people element along with the transformation that leapfrogs. And I think the other thing is that I see a lot in the market, a bit of a fatigue with traditional models, a fatigue with having used a training provider or a consulting firm and not having received not having achieved the outcome that was targeted, basically.
Okay, this is very interesting. I was mentioning this to many of companies that they do not know what they don't know. So how will you be able to understand that they are at a stage where they need to do transformation?
So the real key is people who've been there and done that, Ben. I think that's the real benefit. I can give you two examples. I think one, if you're talking enterprise, right? If you're talking, for example, to banks in Vietnam, and you work with someone on the Flexer side, an operator who has been with a big regional bank, who has taken a regional bank through a digital or AI transformation. They know the shortfalls. They know the potential failure points. They know the weak spots of a transformation strategy because they've done this before in the same sector, basically. And so I think this is the key. It's not theoretical. It is people who've been there and done that. And that means they can partner in a different way. They can embed and partner with the company in a completely, in a much more organic way. Let me put it like this, right? Second example is similar for the SME, right? As an SME owner, if you know that there's an area that you don't have the expertise, but you know you need to work with that, you need to improve in that area, you need to build something new, then you need a partner. And if you don't want to hire a full-time team against this, which could be extremely expensive for you, right? Then bringing in someone who's an operator who's been there and done that before is hugely valuable because they will work from the inside out. They will work as your partner. And this is how I think the transformation is not just fastest, but also sustainable because your team learns with it. There's a knowledge transfer in the whole process. That means you don't need to hand anything over at the end of it.
That's why I talk about the method that probably you are having. We actually saw something that on your website, you call it the build method. Might you share a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I mean, I already shared, right? We have the strength of the real experience of people who have run these sorts of transformations before in the same industry. And so we work a lot with case studies, with real lived case studies, not something out of a management handbook, but something that people have lived and done. And then with local context, applying that case study into local context, seeing where the adaptation needs to happen, where it needs to change, right? Then the frameworks. And again, like if you talk to any consulting firm, they will have a million frameworks, right? The people that run the frameworks don't necessarily know where it can fall down or where it can work well. In our case, the frameworks are developed by people who have the track record, right? And so the frameworks are as simple and as minimal as possible because we work at the end of the day with the real experience that they have on how to make it work. And so it's then the third part of the model is to build together. We don't build in isolation. We don't build as an external party and then implement, but we build together with the internal team. And that means that they can apply this as they walk away from every session with us. Yeah. So they actually can run together with us and in the end, therefore, have a successful new model within a relatively short period of time without having to afterwards look at it and say, we've built something, but I don't really know how to run this now. And I don't know how it's gonna make us successful, you know? Yeah.
But for many organization transformation, right, I think the hardest part is getting the buy-in from the people, right? So how does the build method gets the buy-in of all the people that are involved in the transformation?
Yes, that's a superb question, Joe. I think two things. First of all, I mentioned this before. If you talk to people who have run transformations, usually there's a clear signal to say it has to happen from the inside, right? You cannot come in as an outsider and force a transformation. That is not, especially in large and in legacy organizations, right, where there's a certain way of doing things, you have to work with the system. That's number one. So number two, it helps if the people who are helping you drive that change are peers, because that means they speak your language. That means they can also understand the other pressures, incentives, challenges that you're facing as an individual, leading a team, running a team, being in a team, right? They can say, look, I've been there and done that, and I know how it is. I know the situation that you're in, right? I think that's the first one. So there's a clear, you're working with a peer here. You're not working with a career consultant or someone who is clearly an outsider with a very smart model, but without necessarily the understanding of what I'm facing in the situation that I'm sitting in as the head of a BU or even as the CEO or part of the leadership team, right? I think that's the first most important thing. I think the second part is, and this is very clear from everything that I have seen work or not work in the past, is you need to have, number one, full buy-in from the leadership. And that's not just sponsorship by name, right? And any change or transformation has sponsorship by name, you need to have a senior leader, ideally in a C-level leader who is actually the driver of that change or transformation and who is deeply involved in it also. And then the second thing is never work with one team alone. And I see this, for example, you're saying you're doing a transformation on the technology side, but you're primarily letting the tech team drive it. That means the rest of the business will be disconnected from it, right? The tech team will look at this from a different lens. They will have different objectives with it. If you don't bring the rest of the business along, you're not going to be able to successfully implement something that will work for the whole organization. That means that you need to find out from the beginning how to bring everyone in. What are their incentives? The incentives have to align. And then you need that cross-functional engagement. And all of this can only happen if you have that commitment from the top, right? This is the key. And this is what every single person that I work with at Flexer will tell you, because they are people who have gone through the change themselves and they know what works and what doesn't work.
Okay. So, Moritz, let's go back to the question about your build method again. With you who will be supporting with the cases that you actually done before and present to the client, right? So with the economy and market changing so fast these days, how relevant do you think that the case study that you present is still relevant?
So the cases are not case studies from management books, like I said, right? Mm-hmm. The cases are cases of real change that someone has driven in another organization, and the clients that we work with, they are still waiting to undertake that change, to undertake that transformation, right? And there's two types of insights here, two types of knowledge that comes into this real experience knowledge, right? The first one is the actual transformation piece, which you're absolutely right. This is changing very fast nowadays. If you're looking at AI, for example, you have new capabilities coming up every day. You have new use cases coming up also, right? However, if you look at the reality, a lot of organizations have a massive gap between what they're actually implementing and what they could possibly do, right? So we start from where you are. That's the first thing. And where you are is often as an organization, unless you're really the front runner, which there are very few of, you have very much a long journey still left to go, right? And so all it takes and all we can bring to the table actually is to say, we work with people and we have experience that is ahead of what you have. Because we've worked with organizations who have gone past that hill that you're currently trying to climb, and we can help you do that because we see what works and what doesn't work. The second layer of this, though, is not actually on the actual transformation of the technology or the operations or whatever you're trying to achieve. It is the methodology of change itself, which a lot of organizations struggle with. And this is something that an experienced operator who's been there, done that many times, that is something that is, I would say, relatively timeless, right? Because it is an experience of seeing how people interact with each other. And in the end, especially, I was at a conference a few weeks ago, there was a CTO on stage who said, technical transformation is primarily a people transformation. And if a CTO says this, then you know that this must be true, right? Because the same CTO has struggled with trying to get something done that is absolutely right for the business, but was not able to get it through, right? So in the end of the day, it's a people transformation. And to do that, to have a partner who knows how people react and also then come along or don't come along with change, I think this is, I guess, the second layer. On the technology side, we all need to always learn, adjust, be ahead of the curve, right? The honest truth is that there's a lot of companies out there who are just scratching the surface. And so we help them take the next step, and then ideally leapfrog eventually.
Okay, now, why do business often appear healthy externally while internally struggling with communication, workflow, leadership issue?
Why do companies appear healthy externally when they have internal? Well, I think the external, the things that you see from the outside of an organization, right? These are often the lagging indicators, right? The lagging indicators because clients, customers, business can be stable, can be growing while you're internally already facing issues. But internal is a leading indicator. So you have team challenges, you have friction, you have inefficiencies, and it'll take time for that to translate into into actual external signals. But I think this is, to answer your question, I think I would say that that's the main reason. I think the second reason is that, especially if you're a larger organization, you have legacy, right? You have, and if you work I worked in a tech organization for a few years in the insurance sector, and in the tech environment, you call it technical debt, right? It is the accumulated million decisions over the years that have developed the system that you live in and work in today. But this accumulated legacy of decisions means that you might have a system that will not allow you to make any change in any way quickly, right? And it's the same with operational debt, I would say. You have set up an operational system that has been shaped by years of individuals making decisions, setting up certain things in a certain way. And every once in a while, you need to take a step back and look at it and say, does this system still serve us or not? Right. And so, while you have maybe the lagging indicator still look healthy, on the inside, you're probably somewhat ossified, somewhat siloed, somewhat potentially also culturally in trouble, and you have tension. And all of this comes up into the surface when you're trying to change that system, because at that moment, the frictions, the tensions, also the inefficiencies, and all of these, over the years, every individual decision made sense, but together they make you now a rather, an organization that is really, really resistant to doing anything differently. And this is the part that's difficult, and this is the part that's hard. And that is where, if you have experience with dealing with that, it can help. If you don't, you might have the best technical operational plan. You will not be able to execute it or bring it through your organization, and that's the hard part.
I totally resonate with that. As a fractional CGO, Chief Growth Officer myself, I actually assist a couple of companies, and I realized that from startup to mature stage, the business owner itself usually are the ceiling of the company. Company wasn't be able to break through usually are the owner capability issue. And the funny part is that it's also related to leadership issue. Will you be assisting or take up the case where you realize that it's a very serious leadership issue in the company?
I think leadership issues are hard to diagnose from the outside again, I would say. Yeah. And I tell you why I think so. And that's because leadership can look very different for very different companies, and effective leadership can look very different for very different companies, right? So I would say leadership issues are very individually subjective to the individual organization often, because one style works for one organization, doesn't work for another organization, right? So I'm fairly agnostic when it comes to leadership styles, because I think the most important thing is that it fits the organization. And that you can only find out when you're working with the team from the inside. The second thing, the leadership has to fit to the situation the company is in. That means also that if you're going through a change, then the leadership has to match the change that you're going through. That means you might need a different style of leadership for the change. You might need a different style of leadership for after you have gone through the change, right? And so for me, that is, with every experience that I have, it is all relative to the situation. And that means you can actually, most of the time, you can work with the leader very well if they understand this part. Because if they understand this part, they will come along and understand that as the organization changes, they will also have to change, right? Otherwise, they will not work with the...
Yeah, so is there a common trait in successful leaders that you have seen based on working with them? Because there are so many different types of leadership styles, right? Yeah, and different growth stages, the leader also need to adapt to the situation.
Yes.
So, but I mean, based on your experience, I'm sure you've seen some patterns.
It's a question that to be very honest, I think there's not one style. Maybe let me not talk about the style. I think the style has to match the situation of the company or the future situation of the company, right? But I think when I think back of the leaders that are effective over time that I've worked with, I would say especially when it comes to change and transformation, those who are deeply involved will win. It's not something that you can do by floating at the surface and kind of, hovering over everything. You have to, and your people also need to see you being involved. This is maybe as important, right? I think there was someone I spoke to recently for my podcast, a leader who's just taken an organization through a big change, and his team says about him, they say he's everywhere. Of course, he's not actually everywhere. He cannot be everywhere, but that's the perception, that he is everywhere. He's involved in every part of the organization as it's going through that change, right? And that makes them understand that he cares and that he wants it to go right. And I think this is the first thing. I think this is a very, very good approach, because if you're an absent leader in a time of change or shifting, then you're not likely to be able to generate the trust and the feeling of also psychological safety that people need in order to go through with it, right? The second piece, and I think this is a very common and quite obvious thing, but it is also those who are, despite being involved in everything, those leaders who are able to still instill a very strong sense of ownership in their teams, especially while going through change again, right? So that people understand this is not something that's happening to us or to me, but this is something we are driving because we believe in it. And we want to see the difference, and we are also individually and as teams incentivized. We see that it'll benefit us, all of us, me, our team, etc. Right? If you can get these two parts right, I think for me, that's from experience, it's gonna be hugely helpful and make things a lot easier. Yeah.
True. I believe that you agree with me that leadership skill and managerial skill are totally two different set of skill set, right? So, given the choices for you, would you choose a company with leadership skill or a company with a better managerial skill?
I think that's the wrong choice. Yeah, it's the wrong choice. You need both at the end of the day, because without the managerial skill, you're not going to be able to actually execute what you want to do every day, right? And I would also say it's a question of phasing again. You need both, but for sure, in times of this is a dangerous word to say nowadays. In times of stability, I don't think anyone believes we're in times of ever in times of stability anymore. But like we just mentioned about that legacy buildup, right? In times of let's say relative stability in an organization, the managerial skill will start automatically taking over, because you are basically just primarily using a model that already works, and your number one job is to keep growing that model and running it more effectively, more efficiently, right? So I would say it's just a natural thing to happen, is that this operational side of the business steps into the foreground during times of stability, right? And it also is what in the end cements these ways of working for the right reasons, because it is effective and efficient. But if you realize that you have to take on a new direction, you cannot do this by tweaking your operation, because change is hard for people. Change is hard for teams. You believe that this is how you're successful. How will you then agree that you have to do things differently now? And this is where the leadership piece needs to be dialed up tremendously, right? And this is where I mentioned like different leaders, different styles for different phases of the organization. You need something different for that organization at that point. Yeah.
Of course. I mean, the reason why I was asking why leadership and managerial skill sets are so much different, mainly because I interviewed bosses and I realized that a lot of bosses got very, very good managerial skill set, and leadership skill set somehow rather are missing. And some companies, they have very good managerial skill set, and the bosses itself and the manager have the reverse skill set, which means that the manager are very good leader and the boss are very good manager. You know what I mean?
That's a good one.
Interesting.
Yes. So end of the day, the whole thing reverse. Company performance actually affected because the wrong manager skill set, or wrong manager being engaged. That's why, in a matter of fact, okay, a boss should have a good leadership skill set, while the manager, they themselves should be equipped with good managerial skill set. If not, that title will not be manager anymore, isn't it?
Interesting. Yeah.
They need to reverse their roles, probably. It must be fun, right? Working with them for you.
So, okay, from your experience, what are the most common operational blind spot SME or enterprise fail to notice during growth period?
Let me take it separately, right? So on the enterprise side, I would say, and this is purely from also where I sit with Flexer and how we get involved, right? I would say that there's a belief at one point in organizations that you do training, you get results. You bring in consultants, you get results. And the reality is that often this is just not true. We've all been there, right? We go to an offsite, we go through a 2-week transformation training or leadership training. You come back to your desk and you do things the same way that you have done before. Yeah. It's innovation theater, it's change theater, it's making a big effort, but it doesn't really make a difference. And I come back to this, that the change actually has to come from commitment from everyone. It is not something that you can outsource, that you can just give to someone to do, and it has to come from the inside. And I think that is the blind spot but honestly, I mean, and maybe this is also just the nature of our business, right? The companies that I'm speaking to and where our briefs are coming from have realized this already. Like this, they've been there and done that. And they say, this is not working. I actually want to work with people who can be partners to us. Means they work with our team deeply embedded, rather than taking our people away for a week and then bringing them back and saying, now you have a new team. Yeah. I think for the SMEs, it's a very different challenge. I think, and this is very well known, this is not new, I think, but as you grow, right, every decision roots through the leader, and that works when you're a certain size, 20 people, 50 people, but at some point it does not work anymore. Not only because of constraints of time, etc., a good leader, I think, can still handle that, but also because of constraints of just expertise. And this is, I think, there are certain areas that then come up after a certain size of an organization, which the leader, the owner, does not know anymore what good looks like in that area, because it's not an area of their expertise, right? So, for example, if you're an owner that comes more from a sales and operations background, at one point you probably want to professionalize your marketing, but you don't know what good marketing looks like, or what it even is, or what it's supposed to do, and isn't it kind of this similar to what sales does? What is this funnel? How does that work? So you don't come from that background, so it's difficult for you. It's not difficult to understand, because it's not rocket science, but it's difficult to choose what the right strategy for your organization is in this area. Similar with, for example, you're reaching a certain size and you suddenly have employee engagement issues, or you have issues in a department like finance. And I just call that, like, if you're going through growth, it's when the wheels are coming off in one area a little bit, right? You start getting wobbly, and the reason is that your team that you have in that area is rather junior. You have accountants, you have payroll, HR admin, but you don't have a senior leader HR, you don't have a senior leader finance, and it's all on you, basically. And you just don't know what good looks like in that area. And so not knowing then what good looks like, and not knowing how to prioritize and what to even expect from that area, makes it really, really difficult. Which one do we go to first? HR, marketing, finance, which is the area that we really need to attack now in order to make our system run, and in order to keep up with our organizational development, right? Where do we have to professionalize? I think this is a really hard one for SME owners, and this is also part of the thing that we look to solve with Flexer. Yeah.
So working with a lot of leaders, right? Yeah. So usually there are two common pitfalls that I see in them. So the first is usually ego. It's like, they think they know everything. All right. And secondly, it's really about blind spots. Yeah. So those areas that maybe like what you say, is like, what does a good marketing actually look like? Yeah. So I think these are the areas that I think your method can definitely help enterprises and SME owners bridge the gap, per se. You're serving both Singapore and Vietnam markets. What is the main difference between the leadership styles between Vietnamese and Singaporean leaders?
I would say, I mean, the markets it's not even the styles, it's the markets are so different at a different stage, right? So it's context. I think in both markets, there's a challenge that we see between strategy and execution. There's a gap. But the context is a completely different one. You have a market in Vietnam that is setting these very high growth targets. That's not new, by the way. They've been setting those targets and meeting those targets also for more than a decade now. Ever since I first worked in Vietnam in 2013, and the growth and the drive has been tremendous, right? So you're always looking for the next thing. I think the biggest challenge that Vietnam faces there, that organizations here face, is this catching up on the leadership side. Because you can take a model and you can find a way to adapt the model from maybe other leaders in your industry. If you're in the retail sector, you can look at Singapore retail, you can look at China retail, you can look at US retail, you can see how you can adapt that. But your people have to catch up with it, right? And that's actually such a common thread of every conversation I have in Vietnam around this, is to say, how do we make that mid-level, that layer, mid-management layer step up? Yeah. Because they're expected to do so very, very fast at this point. And what's very interesting for me is that it is not seen as a separate topic. It is not, we need to build leadership, and by the way, we also need to do this operational or technical or digital transformation. It is seen as, we need to build the future of our business, future of retail, future of banking. And there is an operational and technical side, but if our people don't get it and cannot run it and lead it and drive it, right, as leaders, not as managers, or as leaders and as managers, then it's not going to work, right? And so there is this, it is intertwined, is to say, how do our mid-managers actually drive the future of our business? This
is it through training and working with them? It's like, how often do you need to how often do you need to train them and then give them the space to so-called adapt?
Well, I don't think it's training, Joe. That's the thing. I don't think it's training at all. I think it is so intertwined with the operational pieces that you treat it together. Basically, you build the future of the business with them. Means, of course, there are elements in there that have to do with specific leadership training, specific management training, but most of it is about actually starting to work with them in such a way that they lead it, right? Not seeing it as a soft topic, as a separate topic that they, by the way, while we do this transformation, they also need to be sent to a leadership training or academy. This is something very interesting. There's an initiative here being run by an organization. The initiative is training 10,000 CEOs, being run by an organization, a local organization in Vietnam. And if you see the announcement clearly says, and this is over the course of, I think, 5 or 6 years, right? But the announcement clearly says, this is not theoretical. We want these 10,000 CEOs, and we will train those 10,000 CEOs by other CEOs, basically to have a knowledge transfer between people who have been there and done that. And this is the model that is emerging, right? And so I think this is kind of at the core of saying, if we want to make this effective, then our people are not getting trained in theoretical leadership skills, but in how to lead in our organization in this moment in time through the change that we want to drive. And that is not it's primarily learning by doing, right? It is actually starting to work as the leader that you want these people to be. Yeah. This is, I think, at the core of what people have arrived at actually in the organizations that we work with here.
So essentially, it's micro learning on a daily basis, just doing the work.
Yeah, it is. For example, learning through. I give you one model, which is also a Flexer model. It's basically a sprint where you go through the transformation together, but as you go through the transformation on a week-by-week basis, you adjust, you work with us and with the operators that we have to see how you need to run differently, what you need to adapt. And while you're going through that process, you are working in your team with your data, with your organizational setup, and you're growing through the process because you're taking charge of something that you're building yourself. This is effectively it. So yeah, you could say micro learning, or it's learning by doing, or it's actually going through not separating the learning from the doing. That's for sure. It is building it together and then running it together in a new capacity. Yeah.
So Moritz, with culture that is, or bad culture, which is being rooted so deeply, and how does transformation able to make changes with, culture that is so unhealthy?
Which unhealthy culture do you refer to, Ben?
a company culture?
Like, sorry, I don't understand. Which you're saying with an unhealthy company culture, how do you
make the transformation or help them to transform?
So it depends on what unhealthy means, right? I mean, I think I come back to this alignment of incentives. I think often friction and tension happens when either incentives are not aligned, right? So you're expecting, like, let's say one team is driving a change that they think needs to happen, let's say a technical change. It's technology leadership saying we need to move in this new direction. Or in the other way, it's commercial leadership saying we need to move in this new direction, but the incentives of the other teams are not aligned. In fact, maybe they go opposite to that, and that is where friction happens, and that is where the culture gets disrupted. I think this is one. Look, let me also say, I believe that almost everyone comes to work every day with the best intention of do well, right? Doing well, and to be very honest, often these are we are talking about organizational, operational things that have very little to do with the individual. It has to do with the way that people are set up to work, right? So if you're, for example, not aligning incentives, best path to friction, I would say. That's number one. Number two, it comes back to if you're working with a legacy system and you're trying to do something different, but you don't change anything else. You just say we're gonna now aim to digitize our customer journey, but everything else stays the same. It's not in isolation, does not work again. You're working with a legacy system, probably with a legacy leadership style, maybe with a very strong focus on managing rather than leading, what we were mentioning before. And so the friction comes from actually comes back to incentive. What's the incentive to move in the new direction? Yeah, as an individual, as a team, you might feel you have more to lose than you have to gain. It is always risky to try to get onto a new path and to change something in your team. And so the incentivization has to be right. I think a lot of the friction and the issues that happen are related to that. And the second piece, I think, and we have actually our organizational psychologist also working with us on Flexer on some of these topics. And he talks a lot about the dynamics of hierarchy, which I find very interesting. And I think if you can apply the right dynamics of hierarchy to your organization, then you can also resolve some of the friction and tension that might be there, that might also be affecting your culture very negatively. Yeah.
Okay, so in the interest of time, Moritz, I only have one final question for you. Okay. So if there's only one advice that you can give to business owners, what would that be?
I think the advice would be to not treat, if you see the future of your business and it's not what you are currently, how you're currently set up, and you want to get there, the advice is this: don't treat the change that you know the organization has to undergo separately from the change that your people have to undergo. They are not different things. Some leaders only focus on the operational change and don't realize that their people have to not just come along with it, but actually own it, drive it, believe in it, lead it, right? Some treat it as a separate topic, saying, yeah, we're going to go do some leadership training or whatnot. They are intertwined. So it is about, I would say it was about treating those two things as actually one. It is one
running
effort.
It together.
And running it together, right? So don't treat the operational one as the hard topic and the leadership one as a soft topic, or the people one as a soft topic. Treat it as this is the future of your business means both have to work together in the same way, and this is our approach. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Moritz. Thank you very much. I also know that you are very heavily involved in the fractional space. So we will love to have you come back again for another episode to talk about this topic. How's that sound to you?
That sounds great to me. I mean, I think the fraction is a model that works really well for SME owners when they want to bring in this sort of experience. So happy to do that. It's an exciting time in the region in applying skills differently. I think this is what it is, right? And so different ways to do that. What we run at Flexer is part of this. The fractional space is part of that. So happy to come back and have a conversation about them.
Okay, great.
Yes, right. Looking forward. Fractional leadership topic basically over here are pretty gray and pretty confusing to many. And business owners don't even understand why do they need fractional leader to assist them to grow their company. I think we should organize a panel discussion for this particular one. I think it's definitely going to catch a lot of attention.
Sounds good.
I'd be happy to help, and I know enough people in our community. So I mean, a panel, a group discussion, we can get. If you would like to try a different format for ABOSS, I'm happy to help set it up. It's super exciting.
The factional leaders debate. Huh?
Yeah.
Right,
I have one. Whenever we do panels, by the way, and we do run a lot of events also. I usually have one thought, and also actually it's a stated thought in mind where I say, please disagree with each other. There's nothing worse than a panel where everyone just goes like, I agree with you and let me build on it. We're all going to fall asleep, right? There needs to be an element of like, let's actually get to the core of the issues. Let's discuss them. Let's talk about where it works, where it doesn't work. So if you want, I'm happy to help set that up. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
Okay, Moritz, where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, of course, Moritz Kafzak. You can find me on email at Moritz@Flexer.ai. And I usually respond pretty quickly. So get in touch.
Fantastic. All right, great. Thank you, Moritz. Really appreciate your generous sharing and nuggets of wisdom. All right, to all our listeners. Yeah, to all our listeners out there, please subscribe to this channel so that you will not miss any of our episodes.